What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the E-commerce Influence Podcast. My name is Austin Bronner, and today, if you are tuning in, you are turning into one of our greatest hits episodes. We wanted to go back into our archive and pull out the episodes that have had the biggest impact on me and on our listeners and replay them because we've been doing this for a long time, and there's some incredible stuff that we have covered, incredible guests we've brought on. And sometimes I feel like they get a little bit buried. So during the summertime, we wanted to bring them back out. I hope you enjoy this episode. So without any further ado, we will kick this off. Have a great day. Are you working around the clock to build the business you always imagined? Do you want to communicate with your fast-growing list of customers in a personalized way, but also get time back to work on the rest of your business? Do you ever wonder how the companies you admire, the ones that redefine their categories like Living Proof and Chubby's, do it? Well, they do it by building relationships with their customers from the very beginning, while also evolving in real time as their customers' needs change. These companies connect quickly with their customers. They collect their information and start creating personalized experiences and offers that inspire a rapid purchase, often within minutes of uploading their customer data. Klaviyo empowers you to own the most important thing to any business: the relationship between you and your customers, and the experiences you deliver from the first email to the last promotion. To learn more about how Klaviyo helps you own your growth, visit klaviyo.com/influence. That's KLAVIYO.com/influence. At E-commerce Influence, we struggle to answer the same question as most of our listeners. How do we best monetize our hard-earned website traffic? We wanted to improve conversions, personalize experiences for our site visitors, and create pop-ups that people actually love. Lucky for us, we found a solution: Optimonk. Companies like BlendJet, Avon, and The Body Shop use Optimonk because their solutions can boost an online store's revenue by 20%. Optimonk can help you increase average order value, decrease cart abandonment, and collect valuable customer feedback. We work with Optimonk to create a collection of high-converting pop-up templates exclusively for our listeners. Visit optimonk.com/influence to check them out and get a 50% discount off your first 3 months. That's optimonk.com/influence.
Man, what a special show we have today for everybody.
Very, very excited about this show. This is a guest we've wanted to bring on for a long time. And yeah, we're finally happy to pull everything together to make it happen.
Yeah, well, as somebody that is a follower of Tuft & Needle and somebody that actually has slept in a Tuft & Needle mattress for over 2 years, I owe my sleep and I owe a lot of the kind of knowledge on big picture and even small tactical strategic stuff that they did to Tuft & Needle. So I'm excited to get into the weeds here today with our guest, JT Marino.
Yeah, it's a really funny also connection too to how this episode came together. My wife was actually posting on Instagram talking about, she always usually talking about health, but she interviewed me and I was talking a little bit about the E-commerce Influence podcast, and somebody who was following her was actually the PR person for JT and listened to some episodes and was like, oh, I need to get JT on this show. So that's how it all came connected from my wife, just a random Instagram post about a month ago. So yeah, it's hilarious. The episode turned into a deep dive into all things culture at Tuft & Needle, into thought process between scaling, why they bootstrapped, why it was so important to them to bootstrap the business. There's a lot of just like wisdom that JT drops throughout this episode. I think everyone's going to get a lot out of it, especially people who are in the mix of scaling a business right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's a ton of gems here, and I think I took 3 pages of notes off of this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome him to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, man, really excited to have you here. We have wanted to have you on the show for quite some time. So I'm really, really excited that we are able to connect and actually come in here and chat. We've given our guests a little bit of a background on you, just kind of an overview. But why don't you take 30 seconds or a minute or so and just talk about yourself personally and give us an overview of, kind of where you're at right now in the business.
Sure. So, personally, it's a little bit of a loaded question. I don't know. I'm a very curious person, and I always have like the hobby of the year. So, I'm always doing something. I'm never like I get bored really quick. So it's probably something I have in common with a lot of other entrepreneurs. But kind of going back out of grade school, I studied computer science and mathematics. And got into software engineering and then design and then product development, and helped several startups and companies build their software products and their engineering design teams. And then it just sort of came to a point where my best friend and I just decided that we've built enough other people's businesses and products that we wanted to do one of our own. So yeah, just sort of jack of all trades a bit with a couple skill sets that is important if you're going to bootstrap and start a company, which really helped us out between the two of us. So yeah, I would say right now I'm the chief strategy officer of the largest mattress company in the world. 6 years ago, I was an entrepreneur with the goal to disrupt an industry, and before that, just loving Silicon Valley and the fast-paced nature of it, building products and software development, design, and all of that.
Awesome. Well, I want to start off with a question that I'm kind of fascinated by because I was doing a lot of research about you preparing for this interview, reading about the brand, about the company, about your guys' origin story, and then read about you and your business partner, Dehi. And you guys are both, visible on the website. You guys have been building the business together for a long time. You mentioned he is your best friend. Or how did you guys meet? And how did you guys decide to work together? Because anybody who's been in business for a while knows that oftentimes friends don't make the best business partners. How did you guys meet, and how did you guys decide to work together?
Oh, and I totally agree with that. There's definitely edge cases, which I would say that we're definitely an edge case with that. But they say like don't move in with your best friend. It's tough. Like you want to have boundaries if you want to really protect the relationship. But I think we're a really unique pair. So the way that we met, I was at Penn State. And I was the way I went through school kind of a different way, where I would negotiate with professors to develop my own curriculum around something I was building. So if it was an engineering class, I'd find something to make that would contribute to whatever it was that I was like building. And back to the hobby comment, whatever it was I was really fascinated with. So I'd say about 80% of my classes were that way. And one of these classes was this hybrid course between the College of Engineering and the School of Business at Penn State. And the professor, because it was such a hybrid course and it was catered to my project, my class was in her office. So it was almost over office hours. And in one of my sessions, she had recommended that I join the entrepreneurship club at school. And that's something that I don't normally do. I don't really belong to clubs. I'm not very good at networking. I'm extremely introverted. But she was really adamant that I go. And so I worked myself up and got excited about it. Okay, I'm going to meet a lot of other entrepreneurs, find some camaraderie. I'll be able to share what I'm learning. I could learn from them. And so I went to a meetup and was surprised that there were several hundred students. There were presentations and a lot of energy and activity. But I quickly realized by the end of that meetup that I couldn't find anybody that was actually building anything. It was more of talking about the ideas and what they want to build one day, which to me was a little frustrating. It wasn't what I was expecting. So the next session I had with her, I brought that up and said I didn't plan to go back. She asked me how it went, and I said that nobody was really building anything, and that's what I was looking for, were other makers. And she said, "Well, funny you should say that. I have another student who said the exact same thing. Maybe the two of you should meet." And so it was a couple days later, and I met Dehi, And it was almost right from the get-go, we were talking like we had known each other all along. And almost every day since we met on campus, we would meet up. We were almost attached at the hip. He would work on his business. I'd be working on my product. And we were trading knowledge. I was teaching him programming. He was teaching me marketing. And that's sort of how our friendship came together. And zoom forward a few years, we ended up at a startup together in Palo Alto, and pretty much doing the same thing. Like I would be building the product, and he would be developing the marketing materials and the partnerships. And we just decided that we wanted to split and do something of our own. But the way our personalities work is he's very much more operational. It's sort of a cross, but at the same time, he really understands a customer's mindset and how to. He's a great writer, and he really understands how to communicate well, but also understands economics and the finances and all of that. Me on my side, it's more on the marketing side. It's a lot of storytelling, but then on the product side is building and making teams. So yeah, it was a good matchup for us. His Myers-Briggs is the same as my wife, so we are really a good fit. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely been ups and downs, but for the most part, we've been able to keep our friendship strong, and our perspective, and we talk about this, and we go on retreats together at least once a year. Is that our relationship is the golden goose, and the company is the golden egg, and I would sacrifice this whole company to maintain and to keep my relationship with him healthy and strong. So that's just always how we've viewed it, and really caring about the relationship and understanding that when there is a problem, that you got to work it out and confront it.
I think it's just good advice on partnerships generally. It's just in terms of working on the relationship, I think that's fantastic. Getting into the business story a little bit, so you start this company because you decided, and Austin and I have done a lot of research for this interview. You decided, hey, we're gonna start our own thing, and we believe that it can do well, and you very consciously grew the business and scaled the business. And the one big thing, I think, one of them among many that you're known for, is that you didn't take any outside investments. And obviously that was a very conscious choice. Can you describe sort of the moment and the why behind not doing that? Your company's doing well, you're growing it, and you're looking at this and saying, you know what, we want to continue to do what we're doing at this point early in the business.
Sure. So the way we built the business it was very methodical and very considered with the decisions we were making, which I believe sometimes that works well, especially if the principles that you've outlined from day one are mostly right, and it sort of fits with the market and your hypothesis. But we were at a company that, and most of our experience with the companies we had worked with before Tuft & Needle had been heavily funded, but the one that we were at just prior had an enormous amount of seed funding, like enormous, far more than what you would typically see with startups. And even today, the averages are high, much higher than they were 10 years ago. And this was definitely an outlier. And we got to see, and I think because it was at so far to one extreme of so much funding, the downsides of capital and early investment. There's pros and there's cons, and there were a lot of things we didn't like. As an example, there wasn't product market fit from day one. It was more of, and this is really what I saw a lot of in Silicon Valley. It's not all this way, but it is all over the place, where you have entrepreneurs who they want to build a company, they have big dreams, and they come up with, they're searching for an idea, and they come up with an idea. And a lot of times it's sort of it's a little bit of this company, it's a little bit of that company, and it's sort of a mashup. It's a this for that. And but it's not tested, it's this concept. And then what you do is you go and you build your pitch decks, and then you go and see if you can get other people excited, and then see if you can get some investors excited. Then you get your capital, then you build your team, then you build your product, and then so many months or a year later, then you launch it to really find out if your hypothesis was right. And that was the situation we were in at this one. And when it launched, it wasn't right, and it wasn't a fit. It didn't really solve a need. And then, but at the same time, you have all this capital, so no problem. So let's pivot. So then we pivoted to the next best idea, and then we pivoted again. For me, it's frustrating because when you spend so much time and energy working these crazy hours, sprinting to get that new release out, and then you launch it, and it's like, we did it. We're going to hit jackpot now, and then you launch it, and then it's a dud, and then you just throw it all out, and then it's okay. What's the next thing? It gets sort of tiresome, and it leads to burnout. And on the other hand, you're spending a lot of money on marketing, trying to prime the pump and get that flywheel going, or maybe doing PR exercises or hiring a lot of people that maybe you don't need yet. It's not very pragmatic. And as going through and learning engineering principles and first principles, and solving the problem that's immediately at hand. It was very different than what the way that you would typically design and develop a product from my background. So. This is a nutshell. There's a lot more to it. I have a bit of PTSD. But so when we decided, we sort of had it, and before we had lost a lot of faith in how the business was being operated, and that we weren't really, we were just spinning our wheels, that maybe we should take a different approach, and there's no way we're going to convince the company to do it. So maybe we should just break away and start it ourselves. And so when we're thinking about that, okay, so we're going to start a company on our own. I remember this like very clearly. We were walking to the Willows Market in Palo Alto one night, and we did that a lot, and we would just talk, and we decided, let's, before we become toxic here, we need to break away and do something. So I said, Dehi, what if we just left and started our own business and we built it our way? And he's like, all right, let's do it. It was there was no hesitation. It was like, nice. We fist bumped, and that was that. And we were like, okay, so what are we going to do? So before we started searching for an idea, we started having like this retrospective of all the things that we had learned and the pains that we had with seeing how companies were built from scratch. And we sort of laid out a couple principles. And one of those was we didn't want to take any funding. We wanted to be able to find product market fit before we took on capital, because we wanted to, our idea was we would find, before I get into that, the second was we wanted to start with a problem. And I mean, you can read about this, and Paul Graham talks about this, solving a pain that you've had, building a product for yourself. And that's very much the way we wanted to go about it. What is a pain that we've personally experienced? And if we've experienced that, if I've experienced it and he has, then there's probably other people who have too. And if we could solve that, then maybe there would be a market for it. And so that's how we started. We had a few other principles that we like little check boxes we wanted to check as far as how we would go about starting it, but no funding because we didn't want to artificially inflate the success of the business too early. We wanted to find that traction first, which one can give you more leverage when you're pitching and going to raise capital. But two, you really know that you're onto something, because if you don't have the capital to buy your customers, it's like without the training wheels, if you're going to fall or not. So we spent some time thinking about some of the pains that we've had, and one of those on the list was shopping for a mattress, which was it was so boring and archaic and weird. I mean, now it's not, but then it was. And that we kept going back to it because it was the weirdest one on the list. It had nothing to do with software. So that was one of a few other problems that we had outlined. That's really the reason, was we didn't want to take on capital because we wanted to build the company. We wanted it to find traction on its own before we took capital on. And also we didn't want to build it and sacrifice certain qualities, like let's say, as an example, culture, for the sake of growth. We wanted to build a company that we could work for the rest of our lives. Here's a couple other principles. We didn't want to optimize for an exit. We didn't want to decide we're going to IPO it, we're going to sell it. We wanted to, so we didn't want to optimize for it. We wanted to just build a good business. Another principle was so we talked culture, we talked exit. We wanted to be able to pay ourselves what we were currently making, which wasn't much, but we wanted financial freedom. So that was another, and we wanted to go after something big. So if you think about that, if our minimum was just to pay our paychecks, but our maximum was disrupt something big, then it's sort of like we're hoping for the best, but planning for the worst in a sense. And just a little bit of context, we had just enough money in our savings because, we both had a little bit of savings to pay our bills and basically be able to quit our jobs to last us about 6 months from the time that we started this. Actually, it was a few months after that. I would say maybe about 7 months. So we had some time to find something and get it started and get it profitable. So we had that fire under our asses to sprint to something. So anyway, that was I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that was our
100%.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting. I mean, to have those principles. Usually, those things are things people put in way later, not at the beginning. I think that's also a problem with some businesses when you've got an idea and don't know the principles behind it. When did you guys know that you had product market fit? Did you guys start it in Silicon Valley, or did you move to Phoenix to start the business? And then within that, when did you feel like you kind of had the product market fit that you were looking for?
Okay, so we decided we were going to quit our jobs, and it was like May of 2012. And June is when we launched the Tuft & Needle experiment. So we've picked a couple items on the list of problems, and then what we did was we took a legal pad and we took a page per problem, and we wrote at the top the hate list. So for the mattress, we took the hate list for the mattress, and we wrote down everything we hated about shopping for a mattress. He's experienced this too. I've experienced it definitely. And then also everything we hated about mattresses. So the product and also the way you shop for it. Line down the center, and then on the right side for each one of those, what we would do instead if we were gonna build, fix it. Then we took that's basically the fixes, and we reduced it to is the minimum quantity of those that if we were to solve those, we're just using our intuition, that maybe somebody would be willing to buy from a company they've never heard of, one, and two, buy a mattress online. So we took that short list of fixes, and then we sprinted on it. It took about 2 days. We built a website. It was just a throwaway, and we put a photo stock image of a mattress at the top, and then we took those fixes and we rewrote them into like the benefits and features and basically the value proposition. And then at the bottom we had a credit card form, and we hooked up the form so that you could type in your credit card and hit process, but it wouldn't actually take your money. So I've heard this, that if you ask your friends if an idea is a good idea, they want to tell you it's good, even if they don't think so. If you ask a random person on the street, it's better, but it's not still as good as if you can actually tell somebody what it is you offer and they actually hand you some money. So that's why we wanted to have the credit card form. So if you think about this, the approach was, what is the problem? Okay, let's break that down. And then what are the things that if we fix those, it would be just enough that somebody would try you out, because if it's too much scope, then you may never even get to launch. And then let's build an artificial thing and see if we can convince somebody to give us money. And then if somebody does, then we've passed the test. And then now maybe there's definitely something here. So that's what we did. So we launched this site. I was sitting in Coupa Cafe downtown, and Dehi wasn't with me, but I was sitting, it was like 8 p.m. The cafe was buzzing, and I'm just typing on my computer at one of the little tables by the window. And I sent him a text, and I said, okay, the site's up. And then a couple minutes later, it's like, okay, the ad is up. He took out a Google ad. And I'm getting a phone call from him about 15 minutes later, and I answer it, and he's like screaming over the phone. I can't really hear what he's saying. I'm like, what are you saying? What are you saying? And then he said, we just made a sale. And I like snapped up the chair behind me, like almost flew. I mean, it flew behind me, and I put my hands up in the air and I yelled jackpot, like so loud and awkward. And the cafe like froze, and everyone was staring at me, and my eyes were super wide, and I'm like making eye contact, looking around with my mouth open, and I see some people like nodding and smiling, like they knew exactly what just happened. And so that was the pass of the test. So we immediately shut the site down, and then and we decided this was the one that we were going to build. And that's when we got started. So that was in June of 2012. And so over the summer was when we were diving into, okay, well, how do you make a mattress? What are the components? How should we think about product development? Who makes them? What's the manufacturing process? It was the discovery phase, and then it was like the actual going to the factory phase and convincing someone to engage with us. And then October of 2012 was when we officially launched tuftanneedle.com, which later is renamed to tn.com. And that's when we got going.
Yeah, I think that, so first of all, that'll be a great moment in the Tuft and Needle movie is whoever plays you sitting in the coffee shop, you know, it's just like jackpot, like that's going to be a big moment.
I don't know if the mattress industry is sexy enough to make a movie about, but
hey man, you never know. You never know.
Maybe.
I think it's interesting enough to do that, but I think, you know, one thing that I do want you to go into a little bit further is. I love that first story about the first sale off of Google ad. I think that's awesome. But the one thing I loved is you talked about very early on, and clearly your engineering backgrounds, you know, had a big part in this, of you traveling up and down the East Coast, talking to and the West Coast sounded like talking to different people that nobody wanted to give you the time of day. Basically, it reminds me of Daniel from Kind Snacks doing the same thing. He like had a briefcase full of Kind bars that he like went into all these places and was like, do you need Kind bars in your law office type thing? And you did that. And not only did you find eventually someone like it sounded like a smaller manufacturer that wanted to work with you. But you were there for the whole, you were like very intimately involved, which sounds like obviously was a big part of your principles early on of making sure everything was very methodical. But you were embedded. Can you talk a little bit about how important you feel that was to your growth in terms of your philosophy on product development, and how, because I feel like a lot of people now, a lot of e-commerce business owners don't do that to that degree, not even close. Right. It's like, okay, where can we get this manufactured? And it's not something that's really thought about as cohesively and as clearly as you did. So can you kind of talk about your philosophy with that?
Yeah. Well, we had no choice but to do it ourselves because we didn't have the money to hire anybody. So it was out of necessity. We had to actually do the legwork. I can tell you one of the benefits is, well, let me use another example. If you're an engineer and then you become like, let's say, a CTO, and there's different types of CTOs. There's CTOs that got there from the business world as a business person and project manager, and then there's the ones that started as an engineer. The engineers can call bullshit. You know, an engineer, if you were to say we need to refactor something, they understand the value of refactoring. They understand the need for writing good code, but they also understand, there's a time and place for it because now they're merging it with business and speed and getting a project launched. There's a benefit to being able to understand it. And so I could tell you that by being ingrained from the beginning through all of these processes and the different parts of the business that are required, you really understand how it all works. You have it. You can understand all like the supply chain side and the fabric and the foam and the logistics and the shipping, but you also understand the marketing and the branding and and the customer and the feedback, and you can pull it all together in your mind. And that's one of the things that as we've grown, a lot of our team members really don't have full context, so they don't really see how everything's connected. So it's made it really easy for us to make decisions as leaders within the business that takes into account the impact of all of these different parts of the business. When you make a decision, you understand how it ripples through and impacts, the supply chain, but how it also impacts the customer. So I think that there's a huge benefit for a founder to have an intimate understanding of how it all works. As the business grows, you definitely become more distant to it, but you still have a fundamental understanding of how it works, so that you can have those conversations and you understand what your team members are saying to you. So it wasn't so much a principle to start it all ourselves and set it up all ourselves. It was really a requirement, but I can tell you that I'm glad it happened that way.
JT, as you continue to kind of, I want to fast forward a little bit, because I know people are going to be really interested in the moment, kind of the time, like the tipping point when you were able to move from, okay, we have a product that people will buy, to now we have a product that is selling like crazy. How do we continue to scale up and grow from there? At what point, I guess, revenue wise, did you feel like you were at a point where you had your product dialed in and it was your role turned into kind of like, let's grow this thing faster and faster? And maybe you didn't feel that way, but that's kind of my question is kind of, when did it change from trying to figure out the product to let's move on this thing and push it and grow it as fast as we can?
So when we launched in October of 2012, just being Dahi and I, what happened was the sales jumped. I mean, from zero to just enough to be able to pay ourselves. So it's funny how certain decisions are so hard to make. Like, how much should you pay yourself? Like, you have to anchor to something. I remember having several phone calls with Silicon Valley like founders but also other seasoned business professionals that are just like, how do we pay ourselves? And I had one advisor say, well, you pay yourself the least amount possible, and you only pay yourself more when it won't impact the growth in the goal of the business. So originally it jumped to just, if you think about it, this is a high ticket item, so you didn't really have to sell that many mattresses in a month to be able to pay yourself at all. But so it was around 4 months, we were able to pay ourselves ramen profitable. When I say ramen profitable, I literally mean that. We were eating ramen noodles and paying our rent and our bills, and we cut all other expenses, and we kept ourselves like that for almost a year. So if you were to look at the curve jumped within about 4 months to a level. It was almost $1 million run rate within about 4 months. It's not a lot of mattresses if you do the math. $600 mattress, but also consider this is a tangible good. Margin, so the cost of goods, so take half of that out. A marketing expense, take that out, and then you don't end up with much in the end. And we held pretty steady at that level for almost 9 months. And that what I would refer to as the pit of sorrow. They talk about the pit of sorrow. That was our first year, because we couldn't really see it was growing, which conveniently gave us a lot of time to do stuff. So if you don't have the capital to really invest in marketing, and marketing leading to growth and being able to do more projects, you don't have the money to really do much, hire people or grow it. It gave us a lot of time to really perfect the product. So, and figure out the supply chain, set up our books, and get some process together. So it started with an email. Well, it started with a phone call. I would call every customer and ask them what they thought about it. What did they like? What did they not like? We would get returns. We would ask, why are you returning it? And then that all just went into the backlog, which I was really focused on the product. So I would then go back to the design, go to the factory. We would make some iterations and try to reduce the number of complaints, reduce the return rate. So our return rate was getting lower and lower, and satisfaction was climbing. But I would say that we were ready to scale probably mid 2013. But we really weren't scaling. It wasn't until the end of 2013 when we started to blow up. So we were ready to scale to take the next step. I would say about 6 months in, six to 9 months in, where the product was good enough, the policies were good enough, but it was literally just Dahi and I, and then we hired our brothers to do customer support. So by the end of 2013, we wrote, this wasn't the only catalyst, but there was a couple other things that all happened at the same time. We wrote this blog post on Hacker News, and it was a Show HN post, and it was how we bootstrapped to the #1 rated mattress on Amazon, and that post went to the top of Hacker News, and it stayed there for almost 3 days, which doesn't happen often anymore. And one of the readers was Miguel Helft, who was a journalist who then wrote an article after that. This is also when the VC started to discover us. He wrote an article that said, meet the Warby Parker of mattresses, tough to needle. And then it was like, boom. All of this organic traffic started coming to the site. People started buying. I don't think if that article hit into 2012, so right after we launched, we wouldn't have had the stuff in place. And I don't think customers would have been as communicative and almost salespeople to their friends. So I'm talking virality through word of mouth if that article hit earlier. But we had gotten just enough stuff done that our net promoter score, which is just a measure of customer satisfaction, was high enough that our average customer was telling their friends about it. So into 2013, when we wrote that and then that article hit, that's when our growth started to explode, and which then we switched to hiring because we couldn't keep up with the volume of work.
I think focusing early on, you kind of touched on it, putting people at the center of the business, writing that article. You have mentioned previously the community. Well, I mean, following up with people that are purchasing, what did you think? What did you like? What didn't you like? It sounded like Reddit was a big part of your early marketing as well. And it sounds like as time has gone on, billboards and TV have been a surprise for you in terms of marketing. Can you talk about the channels for you that have really, really helped grow the business over time? I mean, PR and clearly your customer satisfaction is customer satisfaction is the #1 growth tool that you have. That's how we have Tough to Needle. I've had our mattress for 2 years because I had a friend who I trust a lot say, hey, you should get this. But
awesome.
What else have you? Yeah. Hey, sleep great. So no complaints. So what other channels in terms of marketing have been for you, a motivator or really, really move the needle?
Well, it depends on the phase of the company. And it also, just for context, for people who hear this, it also was heavily dependent on our limitations. So we didn't have the capital to advertise, because if we did, customer satisfaction may not have been nearly as important. And that goes back to another pain point that I see with heavily funded startups is the customer satisfaction isn't as important. The word of mouth isn't as important because you can buy your customers. So we had to rely on our customers to spread the word. And in order for you to have them do that, you have to blow their minds. And there's not just one way to blow unless your product has some breakthrough innovation that really blows their mind, you have to get everything right. You have to get your price right, your marketing right, your shipping time right, your how your product performs. You have to have. It's like the sum of all things. So that's why we were so heavily dependent on customer feedback, getting it right. And what that did was it segued into this virality of word of mouth, which starts small. It's like a seed. And if you have 10 customers and X percent of them tell their friends, and then after, when they're in market for a mattress and they buy, then some percentage tells their friends. And so it sort of starts small, and then it gets bigger, of course, as your customer base gets bigger. But in that time frame, as we were perfecting and without the dollars to really advertise, we were trying to get our name out there. Now, also for context, being bootstrapped and not having raised capital, it's not as flashy of a story. So PR was something we did not have. So we had to get the word out ourselves. So posting on at that time it was like Facebook, and having our friends post when we would do something. It was going and asking for feedback on subreddits that we knew that if we were very transparent, we're just a couple guys, co-founders, trying to solve this problem, and we need your feedback, even if you don't buy it. What do you think? And that actually led to a lot of customers as well, and wanting to support some founders who really have a genuine interest to solve a problem and a need. So yeah, the forums were really good for us. When I say relative at that time, even just one sale here and there made a big difference. And the gems were the people that were actually giving you raw feedback, even if they were assholes as they did it. We still absorbed all of that criticism. So that's what we did. Then as we started to grow, then your percentage of your revenue, and then your percentage of net income and all of that, everything starts to scale up, and now we can start to spend a little bit more on marketing, and then it really switched to digital marketing. And as I've found, you kind of cap out, you tap it. So you tap out Google Ads, you tap out display, then eventually you tap out Facebook, and then you're left with, okay, what's next? And, well, what about television, billboard, radio? And this is a new world, so it was very difficult to measure, but that's something that took us a little while, but we eventually figured it out. So now we do advertise very heavily. We're really good at it. We still have to be. We go from a bootstrap business to then merging with Serta Simmons, the largest mattress company, who's private equity owned, and EBITDA being very important. So it actually was a perfect match as far as how we operated, because we pinch every penny. We want to make sure every penny has a return and it's just everything becomes a very considered decision. So, but as far as marketing, it changed. It was heavily dependent on limitations early on in our business, continued to be constrained because we had to be profitable or we would be dead. And then as we saw traction, we had to be very heavy on analysis and measurement with our digital marketing. And then later we were able to take those bets with out-of-home marketing.
I'm just going to follow up on that, actually, Austin, if you don't mind, on talking about attribution, because you're talking about the measurement, and you said last year at a Recode event that you kind of figured out or decided on your model for attribution and how all things work together. This is obviously the biggest question, of course, in digital marketing in a lot of cases, but can you talk about what some of that attribution looks like, or the philosophy behind it? Or because it's hard, obviously it's really hard to attribute sales from billboards and other things, as you've said. So I'm curious of what you've settled on that you're like, what, that's really good. We feel good about kind of how this is adding up.
Yeah, sure. So, digital marketing is more straightforward, first, last touch attribution, and your blended acquisition costs also. That's definitely easier to build a model. But when you start to get to billboards and radio and television, you don't know, like YouTube versus TV, you can see who's clicking it. You can see how long they're watching it. Television, you don't have that. I personally do not trust any of those any of those analyses that you can pay for. I just don't believe it. because I'm so used to having hard numbers or numbers that are more significant or trustworthy. So what we had to do, and it took us a while. I remember when we ran our first billboard, we got one billboard. And there's nothing you could really do. Then we realized, wait a second, we have to get a lot of billboards. So we ended up getting 200 billboards in Phoenix. We had to essentially run tests between cities. So we would create a subset of cities that we viewed were lookalikes, and that was between the types of people that lived there, and also that were relatively around the same cost of marketing. There are some cities that have no billboards, where billboards are banned. Some cities that have a lot of them. So we would create these lookalike cities, and then what we would do is we would run a campaign in one, and then we would not run it in another, and then we'd run a different kind of campaign in a third, and then we would run these different tests. We would use intervention analysis per city, so you can just see, all right, this was the day we started it, and what were the numbers and what were we forecasting for that city prior to, and then we also had a lookalike city to also comp against. So after running enough of these scenarios, and it was a serious investment, we decided that if this didn't work, we were okay essentially burning that cash in a dumpster. We knew that if we could figure it out, that the payoff would be totally worth it. But in the case we didn't, we wouldn't be, we're not betting the house. We never make house betting types of decisions. So we would take different cities and we'd run different scenarios. Here's another example. We'd have one city that was billboard and television, another one that was billboard and radio, another one that was, and then one that was just radio, one that was just TV. And we found very quickly, just like you would probably read in the books, that you need to plant the seed as far as your messaging in multiple different ways, and people need to hear your message a number of different ways, not just one. So we found that by using different mediums to advertise work really well together. We also found that you can have digital sort of coalesce with non-digital. So as an example, if you're going to advertise to, on a certain television station, you can figure out who watches that television station based on if they follow the news channel on Facebook. And then you can create lookalikes, and then you can use that data to then create to create segments on Google and other channels to then advertise to the people that would most likely have seen that ad. So we started to find new techniques where the digital and the non-digital start to work together in a more targeted and more relevant way. And then we're testing cities against each other. And then what we did was we built a model behind it so that we knew, like, when we go into a city, it has to be like this. This is the most that we could possibly pay. And then when we go in, we start with, billboards, or we start with radio. Or if we do radio, we're only going to do this kind of a radio, or a radio channel that has this kind of. So we built this whole model and these playbooks that we were able to consistently see results from with a positive return. And that took a lot of time, and it took a lot of help from some data scientists on our team. That was actually a huge breakthrough, was getting a really good data scientist who understands the business case and can translate it, not just in, this isn't statistically significant, but actually gives you a good point of view and can help your team to actually get to an answer. So it's not something I can really dive in and give you all the details. It would take too long, but that was cursory how we approached it.
That's really interesting, and something I haven't heard many people talk about. Mostly, I think part of it because there's not a ton of e-commerce founders that have gotten to the scale that you've gotten to and had to figure it out. So I don't know where did you go to get that information? Did you reach out to other businesses? Did you reach out to other founders? How did you go down that path to try to even come up with the idea to solve that problem?
Well, yes, we did reach out to a lot of other founders and businesses, but no one could really answer us because we kept finding that nobody knew how to do it. So, but we saw that we had to keep growing. And when you've tapped out a source, you look for other avenues to grow. So, but if you just, we had this itch, this bug in our ear that was like saying it companies spend so much money doing this. It must work. There must be a way to make it work. Maybe we can't figure it out. I mean, at some point, we'll just give it up, and then later we'll try it again. But we just believed that we could figure it out. There's got to be a way to do it. So we kept going down and breaking it down. How could we measure? How could we test? And I could tell you that there was a lot of times where you have team members say, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. I'm telling you. And then you run a test and it doesn't work, but someone has to have a strong voice like, look, let's just try it again. Let's try it another way. And then we just found, we followed our nose and we finally figured it out. So, but yeah, I don't really, and there are, you said that there's not a lot of e-commerce companies our size, but I'll tell you the ones that are, I would bet that a lot of them are not profitable. I would tell you that most of these companies aren't profitable. But what is their motivation? What is their motivation to actually figure out how to make it work when they don't have to be profitable? And it's more about the PR and building value behind their stocks in order to raise more capital and eventually flip it and leave it to somebody else to figure out. But we have to figure it out because if we lose our profits, we're gone. So we were sort of just
brother.
forced.
I'm with
you. Yeah.
Well, I want to transition a little bit, but it's not really a transition because it's related to what you're just talking about. You mentioned it earlier when you talked about how you bootstrapped to being the number one rated mattress on Amazon.com. I did a search today, and you guys are listed as their suggested mattress, and you guys are selling a lot on Amazon right now. In our community, in the e-commerce community, there's a lot of differing opinions about Amazon, right? Some people are removing their listings from Amazon. Some people are staying in it and kind of doubling down because there's incredible amounts of growth there. How did you guys decide to list on Amazon initially? And what have you learned from your time working with Amazon about kind of how to think about the relationship between a brand and Amazon?
Well, when we initially listed on Amazon, it was not to sell mattresses. We didn't actually think people bought mattresses on Amazon. The reason we listed there, so I would say that up until we started this company, I didn't know anything about brand. I didn't know the value of brand. I couldn't even define it to you. Now I know a lot more and could define it. My definition might be different than someone else's. It's this sort of abstract concept, but I very much value brand and what it means. But I still feel like I'm still like an amateur. There's so much to learn. But when you're starting a brand that no one's heard of, and I think this is not as relevant to tech companies. I think this is more relevant to more of a tangible good and consumer goods businesses where customers are really researching between brands. You have to make a name for yourself. And when somebody sees your name, they wonder, like, who is this? Or do other people know about this? And so one of the avenues you can take to build credibility is reviews. Well, we can build a review engine on our site, no problem. We could roll it our own. We could use a review some SaaS software to install it. But we were thinking about it from our perspective, like when we go shopping for something ourselves, how do we do it? Well, one of the places we go to read reviews is Amazon. Even if we're not going to buy it from Amazon, we go to read those reviews. That was the whole point. So we listed on Amazon because we found out you can send your customers to Amazon to write reviews, even if they didn't buy it on Amazon, which, there's a lot of controversy around that, and a lot of companies have gamed it, fake reviews and all that. But I mean, even though a lot of our reviews are unverified, they're our customers. So we have an automated email that goes out to customers asking them to write a review, and it's a link to go to Amazon and write a review. So that was the reason we listed there, was so instead of putting reviews on our own site, we would send them somewhere that they could write that review. So at the very least, people were confident that it's most likely that this person writing this review has an Amazon account, so they're probably real. That's not always the case anymore because there's a lot of ways to game it, but that's why we listed on Amazon. Then what we found out was, I can tell you, before we put it on Amazon, I was having a panic attack because, for the very reason we want to put reviews over there to be more credible, it's also those reviews are out of your control. So if we were to list it there, oh my God, well, what if it just becomes a 1-star and then we're done? Like, people read these reviews and they don't buy from us. So what we set a goal. We wanted our net promoter score, so customer satisfaction, to be at least a 65. And the creator of Net Promoter Score had reached out to and asked his advice, because he advises a lot of other companies on how to use that customer satisfaction. He says, if you hit a 65, you will most likely have a product that will be rated well. So then we're like, okay, let's do it. So 65, we hit it. Now we're going to put our product over there and let's see what happens when we send customers rate reviews. And they started coming in almost all 5 stars. It almost looked fake because it was so good. And what happened was our product became the highest rated product in the entire furniture category on Amazon. And then, well, apparently people buy mattresses on Amazon. It's grown a lot since then, but at that time, so we started getting orders through Amazon, and then it became a serious channel for us. It was a smaller subset. It was somewhere around 20% of our unit volume at the time, within a matter of, I don't know, maybe 3 to 6 months. And then that market on Amazon has continued to grow. But so it started off for just a credibility marker, which did help build our brand, and then conveniently and serendipitously became a nice revenue source for us. It also taught us how to work with a distributor and another platform, so that we can understand the dynamics between selling direct but also selling through a retailer. But as far as your question about differing opinions and people pulling their listings, Amazon has its goals. And if your business model fits it, then you have a choice. If you're going to go and sell there are people buying products like yours most likely on Amazon. Do you want to capture those customers for your brand or not? And what are the sacrifices you make? So we had a lot of discussions about that. And one of the things that we thought about, we basically installed a principle that we would not become dependent on Amazon. We should always be able to stand on our own. So we created 2 P&Ls. So we had our blended P&L, but we had a P&L for the business on Amazon and one for our .com. And we wanted to always be sure that if at any time that Amazon account were to just be deleted, that we would be fine. We wouldn't have to do a layoff. We would still be solid. And then the monies that we made through Amazon, we would use that to continue to build a great brand, so that it would continue to strengthen our brand, our direct business, and the business on Amazon. So yeah, there's definitely pros and cons. It's probably very dependent on the market, what the buyers in that particular market on Amazon, how they behave and what their goals are, and how your business model works, if you even have the margin to do it. But for us, it was very beneficial. So, we were able to grow faster and be more successful by being on Amazon. But here's another thing to consider. If your goal is to be a big company in a big business, you can't do it all. Maybe you can, but you can't. It's difficult to do it all direct, because there are people, like, let's say Costco. There are people that will only buy on Costco, and there's a large percentage of the United States that will do that, or Sam's Club. And if they're going to buy a mattress, they're going to buy a mattress there. They don't want to buy anywhere else. There are people that will only buy on Amazon. There are people that shop Amazon, shop Costco and Sam's, but will buy direct. So if you want to grow, like, you have to seriously consider all these other places that people want to buy their stuff, and you can't fight what the customer wants to do. You can influence it, but you really can't fight what the truth is. And when it comes to online, you have to look at your market. If you look at the mattress market, 30% of the business, it's hard to measure, but it's between 20 and 30% of it is online. So if you decide you're going to be a purely online mattress business, then you can only ever grow to 20 to 30% of what the full size is, which is 17 billion. And then you're going to also have competitors. So you're only going to get a smaller percentage of that. You're not going to get the full thing. So if you want to be big, you're going to have to expand to other channels until eventually one day online fully cannibalizes all of those other channels. But that may or may not happen, or it may not happen within the next 10 years and during the time period you want to be within the company you're in. So, and if you look at a lot of these D2C digitally native brands, they really start to cap out around 200 to 300 million. They just slow down. And you hit the law of big numbers, and those markets they're not $1 trillion markets. They're like billion to 10 billion maybe and size markets. And the percentage that's online is limited. It's not the whole, it's a smaller percentage than the whole thing. So if you want to keep growing, you've got to expand, and you have to consider it. So you just have to make a choice of what do you want to be. If you look at what household name brands are and how they work, they're everywhere. If you think of a brand that you've grown up with, they're everywhere. They're in all the stores. And that's not to say the only way to become a household name brand is to be in all the channels that people shop, but that definitely is a characteristic that you'll find with brands like that.
Do you guys, just to kind of go towards, I mean, you built a business that was so profitable, that has been profitable since not necessarily day one, but first couple months. You guys got to a point where you're talking about growth and growing and where you guys wanted to go. It seems like you didn't need to do anything. You guys didn't need to merge with Serta. Your business was profitable. You guys were growing. You could have continued on that path. Why did you guys decide to merge with Serta this last year?
Well, that's actually very relevant to the last topic. So we started to our growth started to slow down, which makes perfect sense because we were primarily online and Amazon. So we realized that we had to continue to expand and distribute. And our customers literally tell us this. If you listen to them, they're saying, where can I go and try your mattress out? I want to see it before I buy it. It's as simple as that. And even if it's like an older demographic, that's a big market. And at some point, the younger demographic will take over, and maybe they don't care. But in the meantime, there's people still wanting to buy and go and see it. So we had to decide, and I remember this conversation. I mean, it was actually literally in the room I'm sitting in with Dehi, where we had to decide: do we want to keep building and keep growing? Do we want to be the number one? Our goal when we started was back to those principles. We wanted to disrupt something big if we could, but if it would end up being very small just to pay the two of us and we were the only employees, that was okay. And then we'll find something else if we wanted to go bigger. But we wanted to disrupt an industry. What we found we had this hypothesis we further substantiated as we grew, is that the mattress industry needs to be disrupted and it needs to change because it wasn't serving the customer. It was serving the businesses and shareholders over the customer. And our hypothesis was if we serve the customer and built or made our company customer centric, which is a buzzword, but in other words, make products and services for the customer and keep iterating on them to keep blowing their minds. If you did that, it would eventually become the best outcome for shareholders and the company. But if you always take care of the customer first, then theoretically it should take care of all the rest, the nice to haves. And so we knew that for us and as founders, we're sort of righteous founders in a sense that we want to do something that we're proud of. It's not just about an exit. It was always pride in building something great that mattered first and then reward second. So we wanted to disrupt the industry by making it customer centric. And because it was this righteous point of view, that even meant that if a competitor did it, if Tempur-Pedic and Serta and Simmons and Sealy and Sleep Number and all these big giant brands that you hear of, if they were to all of a sudden start taking care of their customer, then it technically would define or accomplish that mission. So we didn't necessarily say we want to be number one. But we knew that if we became the number one, the leader always sets the trend and the competitors follow. So we knew that if we could get to number one, it would cause this change for the customers. So that was our perspective. So as we're starting to slow down in our growth, and if you look at the percentage of the market that we had, it was something like 2%. That's not nearly as big as some of the big companies. We had to keep going. But if you're this brand that not a lot of people know about, you have a small percentage, how are you going to get into these big distributors? How do you get into Sam's Club and Costco and Walmart and all these other big retailers if you're like a no-name? Well, it's like a chicken and egg problem. You're not big until you distribute, and we've always had a PR issue as well. So we aren't always in the news like some of our lookalike companies that launched after we did that raised a lot of capital. So So we saw that maybe we need to start opening retail stores, our own. If we can't get the big guys to carry our products, maybe we need to start opening our own because there's no other choice. And so we did, and we started doing radio, television, billboards, and we started opening some retail stores because our customers were asking for experience to experience our product. And then we figured out that model, that data science model, so that we can measure a return. It also incorporated retail stores, and we figured out how to make it work. So we decided finally we're going to go and raise capital. We need $25 million if we're going to, and that would be enough for us to accelerate, to open up however many stores we felt would cover the majority of the U.S. So we thought it was going to be probably somewhere around 200 to 300 stores. So anyway, so we go on this, sorry about that. So we go on this journey to raise capital to expand our retail stores, and then we have this opportunity to have a conversation with some of these big competitors, the companies that we had set out to disrupt and change. And Serta Simmons was one of those. They're the biggest manufacturer. You have the big retailers that you can probably think of, but there's this manufacturer is kind of like at the root. And so we're talking with them, and we wanted to take the meeting just to meet them and kind of understand how they think. What we found was this company recognizes it's being disrupted and wants to change. And when I asked them, the CEO, what do you want to be in 5 years? And he described exactly what we wanted to be in 5 years. So he wanted to be like Tuft & Needle in the sense of a customer-centric brand that customers love, that like really service them well. What do we want to be? Well, we're already that, but we have the brand affinity and the brand loyalty, but we don't have the brand awareness. We want to be as big as them. We want to distribute. So we're at this point where we're trying to figure out how to get into these distributors and expand, because they're capping out online. It's just the market's not big enough anymore. And this company already has that, but it wants to be like us. So that's where this idea that if we were to put the companies together, and if we could go in sort of like raiding the ship like pirates and change them from the inside, then we could cause this disruption much faster. We can change it to being customer centric. So that was the idea. Tuft & Needle could instantly unlock distribution across the nation in the biggest distributors, but we can also change Serta and Simmons and all of those brands to being like Tuft & Needle, and we can accomplish that mission of being a leader instantly, and then making it customer centric. And now the customer wins, because all of the other competitors they'll have no choice but to ship in 2 days, have free trials, best in class products that last a long time, and incredible customer support, great price, like all of that. All the competitors will have no choice but to match it. So it was a way to accelerate us to our mission in an expedited fashion. And then for them, it was expediting to becoming this new model that is customer driven, so that they could immortalize their brands and be able to be relevant to a future day.
Absolutely. Love that story. It makes a ton of sense. And I guess I'm curious, hearing that now is wondering, you're the chief strategy officer now, and wondering, where do you think the mattress industry is going? It's incredibly competitive, seems very cutthroat. I think sort of people are trying to outdo each other to some degree. And I wonder your take on that looking forward.
I think what's going to happen is you're going to see, the customer journey is changing. Customers, they don't go in. Well, this is very relevant. This is constrained to this market. When customers go shopping for a product like a mattress, they don't go to the store first. What they do is they decide they want a mattress, and the first thing to do is they grab their phone and then they do a search. I think that's how most of us shop anyway. That's how I shop. And then you decide if you're going to get on your laptop, and then you decide if you're going to go to a store. You start with your research, especially for a high ticket item. And if you don't match that process, and if you're not there right at the starting point, then you're opening up this white space for someone else to be there. And then whoever is there, it's just like you hear with the Microsofts and Apples in the old days. Like, it was a challenge to build the platform, the gateway, to get as close to the customer as possible. It was the operating system, and then it was the browser, and now it's like the mobile devices. And the closer you are to the customer, you're the starting point, and you have the control control. I mean, you want to get close to the customer to when they start their journey. And I believe what will happen is you're going to see, at least within the mattress industry, and I would expect all other markets, there's markets far, lightning speed ahead of us. But you're going to see the brands getting closer to the customer, listening to them and developing products for them. And those are the companies I believe will win. So that is really what our current mission is to, within just this short time window, is to transform sort of Simmons as a whole to being like Tuft & Needle and scaling Tuft & Needle through distributors, not sacrificing any of